waiting for this. Kept you waiting, huh?
Hey guys, this is Press Any Button and we are back with another part of our action adventure series. Now last time we set up the movement, we got our character tilting and everything like that, and we're going to finish up our movement, our basic movement, shall I say, with a jump mechanic. And you know, we need a jump mechanic because we need some sick aerials. You know, we need to be styling on people like it's Devil May Cry, because this is what inspired this tutorial. So I'm going to show you a demonstration of what we've got so far. Alright, so we have the character running, of course, and that's nothing new to us. And we have a little bit of a jump mechanic. Now you're going to notice a couple of things with this jump. It's a bit strong, it's a bit floaty, but don't worry, we're going to address all of that in a moment. Now this is going to be a pretty chill part, to be honest, because it's just going to take place in Visual Studio for the most part. I haven't done any animations with our jump, so that's why it's looking a bit janky right now, but we'll explore that in a future part. For now, let's just hop on over to Visual Studio and see what we've done to get this mechanic going. Alright, so the first thing that we needed to do is we needed to get a ground check. That's like jumping 101. Even in real life, you need to be on the ground to jump. Unfortunately, in real life, you know, people can't fly unless you use a plane or something, and you can't jump unless you have some force, something to push off of. And so we need to simulate that in Unity. The last time we did that in our run and gun series, and we did that with a ground check. The way we implemented that is we had an overlap circle, I think in physics, and then we said, you know, if this is overlapping with a certain layer, which is our ground layer, then we are given the ability to jump. Now we can't really do that same method in 3D. It just won't allow us to do that. Maybe it will, maybe I'm dumb, but we found a different way to do that. So we're going to start off with this ground check mechanic that I've been speaking about. We start off with a bool. Grounded equals true. Simple stuff. And then in fixed update, we're going to go anim.setBool ground is grounded. Then we go down to void update. Right now it says if grounded equals true, and we hit input.getButtonDown jump, which is of course our spacebar. Anim.setBool, that becomes false because then we are in the air. And the rigid body for our player.velocity equals this new vector 3. So it's just the x value and the z value and a jump force, which we've put as a public float up here. I should have mentioned we did have a reference to our rigid body, so I made a reference here, rigid body, player body. And then in void start we said player body equals get component rigid body. So it's just gonna bump that rigid body up in the air by a particular jump force. So we've talked about what happens if, you know, we make that input and we jump. But what's actually driving this ground check is at the bottom here. So void on collision enter. So we are saying when we collide with a certain thing, and this game object is a game object that we've tagged as platform, so that's going to be our ground. So when we collide with our ground, grounded is true, which means we are able to do this, because when grounded is true and we hit the spacebar, then all of this comes into play. Our force is applied, grounded becomes false. Right, and then we go to void on collision exit. When we exit that collision, when we, you know, get away from the ground, then grounded equals false. It's some really basic stuff, but it works. And so that's how our ground check really works. It's just on trigger exit and on trigger enter, and we're just using those colliders that are colliding against each other. So if I go back into Unity, you're going to see a couple of things that I've set up. So obviously we've got ground here. Just refresh your minds a little bit. So it's a bool, so we do bool and then we do ground, type it exactly as you saw in your script. And then I have my terrain here, which we're going to manipulate at some point. And I haven't done it as a layer, I've done it just as a tag. So I've just tagged the game object as platform. So every game object that has the tag platform is going to be an object that we can jump off of. Great, so that's the first part of our jump. So let me demonstrate to you what would happen if we left things just like that. So I've popped back into my game, and this is essentially what things would look like if we just left the script at that. There would be a couple more bits of jankiness, so like whenever I jump while turning, things wouldn't work out too well, just like they didn't right there. And I wouldn't return to, you know, like a straight position unless I double tapped the key that I was holding down. You can see, like, if I jump and do it, I'm still in that angle. However, if I release that key, then it's all good. And if I don't touch the key before I leave the ground, then it's all good. If I run and then twirl, it's all good. And if we look at how our character moves in the air, they're pretty much just flying. I mean, there's no downside to them being in the air. They move at the exact same speed. They just have a little bit more altitude. And that's not really what we want. That's not how it works in real life. If I jump forward, I'm not gonna be able to double back more than I actually had in my run up, you know? That's just not how things work, and that's not gonna be how things work in our game. So we're gonna add some aerial movement. We're gonna dampen things in the air, and we're gonna quicken things in terms of our aerial rotation, because as you saw, when I was jumping, I was a little bit faster in the air. And I thought, you know, on a personal level, I thought it'd just be cooler to be able to have a character that's like, oh, more versatility in the air. As I said, for those sick aerials that we're going to implement in a bit. All right, so we go back to Visual Studio, and I'm gonna unblur some bits. And now you're gonna see that we have all of this stuff down here. So if grounded equals true, you know, it's just what we had in void update just by itself. But I actually copied and pasted the text over into a different if statement. So I created two if statements, if grounded equals true and if grounded equals false. So if grounded equals true, everything remains the same. And if grounded equals false, then we have some new values. We have a couple new floats, air horizontal and air vertical. And then we have input.getAxis horizontal, vertical, so that's the same, you know, controls. We're just using WASD or our arrow keys. And then we have airspeed, which is a different value. Now the airspeed, it's just a float. It's just something that we're going to change. I've set it to 10 for each, but as you've seen, I've been able to manipulate that, and then we times it by time delta time. So it is really just the same stuff we have up here with a couple of name mix-ups. And I spoke about how our character would tilt and jump, and then if I release the key, then they would get back to their correct orientation. Now that's just going to be a temporary thing, because of course we're going to have different animations and we're going to have different triggers for those animations while in the air in the future. But just for convenience sake, it was very glitchy when we left the statements that set things to true in here. So if you get rid of all those statements and you just bundle them together as false statements, then every time you let go or release one of your side-to-side moving keys, then your character will get to that orientation. Otherwise, they'll stick with the orientation that they jumped with, they'll land, and then you'll try to get your orientation back, and they'll rotate a little bit more, and then they'll start to fall over, and it's a complete mess. So you can see all of those public floats are down in the inspector here, and I got a little bit less movement, so I've set it to 10. It's not, you know, the most ideal thing. We can still change it a little bit, however it dampens our movement just a little bit. We are a bit floaty, I'm going to address that. And also I've done something that I said I wouldn't do, which was showing you my secret little bit, and that was our double jump. Now I guess I'll explain that to you guys. So our double jump is handled in very, very simple way in a couple of lines of code. So essentially it just counts the amount of jumps that we make after grounded equals false. So we got a private constant integer here, max jump, and then we got a private integer current jump. So our current jump when leaving the ground, when we do on collision exit, our current jump is going to be 0. So what you want to do is you want to go to void on collision exit. You want to set your current jump to 0. Make sure you get that semicolon in there. And then in void update, you're going to put these 2 little line thingies, and you're just going to add this little bit in the bracket where you would have had grounded equals true. So max jump greater than current jump, input.get button down, all that stuff, and these things occur. Now when we're not grounded, we can actually start counting the amount of jumps that we have left. So as soon as we leave the ground, we have 0 jumps that we've used, and we have 1 jump remaining, which is our max jump. And then once we use that 1 jump, we cannot use any more jumps. We can't jump anymore. And that's essentially our double jump. It's very simple, guys. It took me ages. It didn't feel very simple, but it's very simple. And I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial. However, I am getting ahead of myself a little bit. I did say I would explain why our character was a bit floaty. Now, we've had this character for a little bit, and we've been working with them a little bit, but what we haven't noticed is their size. Now, here's a cube of scale 111. That is 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. Our character is not some kind of kung fu cat. He is actually a Gundam or a Transformer at this point, and is way too big to be jumping in a quick fashion. So what's happened is Unity's physics engine has compensated for his size. Objects with bigger mass, they're gonna come down a little bit slower looking because they're huge. You ever seen like a movie like, I don't know, Godzilla, and something falls? It looks like it takes ages. And so that's what Unity's been doing with our character, but we haven't noticed that. So what we're just gonna do is we're gonna select our character, go over to the scale tool here, and scale them down. Now we can do this in multiple ways. You can do it by hand, you can do it as I'm doing it right here in the inspector, but we just scale down our character. There you are. That's a reasonable size. But you'll notice, let's take a look at the player camera, our character is tiny now. They're not actually tiny, they're just the right size. So we're going to just pull this in, come down, pull this in again, and we should be good to go. That should sort of compensate for that. The angle will work on that, and the jump is very high, and that's just because we need to change that outside of the game. But for now, I'll just go to the inspector, and I'm gonna half the jump force for our character to about 5. Do not do that. And there we go, we've got a pretty reasonable jump. That's like a Super Mario-esque jump. It has a little bit of floatiness to it, has a little bit of airtime to it, but to be honest, as I keep saying, we are going to be doing those sick aerials in a couple of tutorials time. So that has been me, press any button, with another Unity tutorial. I've really enjoyed making this one. Thank you guys for sticking around, for supporting the channel, and thank you guys for just letting me know like how this has actually helped you. Whenever you guys say, I was doing a project or something, and it kind of helped me out a bit, listening to this full mumble about things that you don't really know, understand? Yo, that gives me a kick. Anyway, I will see you guys in a little bit, and in the meantime, press on and keep creating.